Hello. Welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. My name is Bruce Gemmel. I'm here with Julie Rauer. And basically, this is the anniversary episode, episode 61. What is the Realm of Ideas? And this is a series of ruminations that we've been doing for a while. I guess I think I started this in December of 2 years ago, December 2023. I had done it previously with another platform, wasn't satisfied with that, had done quite a few of them, but then kind of found as if like it was better to kind of end up over here. I've enjoyed being over here. We've done 61 episodes. We also some other videos that weren't, the live. And we're actually doing quite well. We're kind of approaching. What is it now? We have 140 subscribers.
141.
Julie's done a really great job, kind of getting interest in the channel, and we'll soon be 150, which is not a big, thing by kind of like
Big
content
thing for
standards,
us,
but
yeah.
exactly. I mean, we're talking about ideas. I mean, we're not,
Shoes.
like shoes or
celebrities.
celebrities. Exactly. I mean, so for us, I mean,
Or celebrity pets.
there's not a lot of people who kind of get a lot of attention speaking about ideas.
Almost no one.
And then, and by that, I mean, like, the realm of politics is not the realm of ideas. So anyway, what we're going to talk about tonight is actually probably about as political as we get, because it does take into account some of the social reality that we kind of find ourselves immersed in, and it does have an impact on what we're going to talk about. But basically, when I started the realm of ideas is free to all, I was thinking about it in terms of a kind of a uh, invitation and engagement, to kind of welcome people into what we as humans have as a tremendous opportunity and privilege, which is to engage in discussion and free uh, and open discussion and thought. So the realm of ideas is free to all was basically that invitation to kind of, ask people in to kind of, engage. So a series of kind of ruminations, kind of until eventually there would be a kind of dialogue or exchange. Here's Julie.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, P.
Hi, P. So,
You look very tall.
basically, okay. Maybe it's because I'm not fat anymore.
Move the arrow off my little
Okay,
face
okay,
there.
there we go.
Thank you.
So, that's basically it. So, what happened as a kind of engagement to join in what is probably one of the most enjoyable and precious opportunities that an individual can use their mind for.
Mhm.
Now I kind of see it as something I have to proclaim, as something that we have to fight to maintain.
Yep.
So that's the basic premise. So before we get into that too much, let me read from the piece that kind of started this. David Hume's A Treatise on Human Nature, which is falling apart because I've kind of read it into submission, is maybe it's not one of my favorite. It's probably one of my top five favorite
It should be.
books. Yeah, I mean, I think Origin of Species might be my favorite book. Well, actually, no, Julie's book is my favorite book.
Thank you.
But yeah, so
What about Whitehead?
well, yeah, Whitehead's up there too. I mean, it's like it's and I mean, there's Ortega, and there's like, of course, Maeterlinck and Dostoevsky and Kafka and Borges. I mean, there's like so many. But I mean, I think what's interesting is that I am always reading new books, but at the same time, what I do is reread books that have made a kind of impression on me.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that kind of made an impression on me, which is I think one of the things that we're talking about, is from this short part near the end of book 2 of the Passions of Hume, and it has a really great title, Of Curiosity or the Love of Truth.
That is a great.
No, it is a great title, and
Mm-hmm.
let me see what it is. Okay.
Mm.
Truth
Tired.
is of two kinds, consisting either in the discovery of the proportions of ideas considered as such, or in the conformity of our ideas to objects of their real existence. So in this case, he's talking about the fact that truth has a consequence in terms of the nature of understanding ideas and the nature of understanding objects. So for me, there is a reason to believe that the universe is knowable. And I think we look around and we see evidence that there's a potential to believe such a thing. In order to believe that there's a value to that, there needs to be something that which we register. Truth seems to be that which is kind of most useful. And in fact, Hume talks about the fact that the utility of believing in certain things is the reason why they kind of can have value and consequence. So the first and most considerable circumstance requisite to render truth agreeable is the genius and capacity which is employed in its invention and discovery. So what he's saying is truth is actually something that we engage in for its own sake, and that this idea that we have a social imperative or we have a cultural imperative, or that the things that we do, have some kind of like, consciousness or conscience, is really kind of not the case. I mean, we pursue certain things because they are agreeable. We are drawn to them as a passion. And, when he talks about curiosity or the love of truth, he really kind of isolates this. And let me just read it here. He says, I think we have been not a little inattentive to run over so many different parts of the human mind and examine so many passions without taking once into the consideration the love of truth, which was the first source of all our inquiries. Till therefore we proper before we leave this subject to bestow a few reflections on the passion and shew its origin in human nature. 'Tis an affection of so peculiar a kind that would have been impossible to have treated it in and under any of the other heads which we have examined without danger of obscuring and its confusion. And then we talked about the two different kinds of truths. And here's another piece I think is really beautiful. We never are obliged to fix our attention or exert our genius, which of all other exercises of the mind is the most pleasant and agreeable. And then he talks about the fact that there are certain things that happen in terms of the way in which people engage towards engaging the imagination and the pursuit of truth. And he says here, were they convinced that their discoveries were of no consequence? Was their inquiry lose its relish or the studies? So in terms of like the fact that people don't do it for you, they don't do it for humanity. And, and what he says is, this seems to be a contradiction. And then he says, to remove this contradiction, we must consider that there are certain desires and inclination which go no farther than the imagination and rather the faint shadows and images of passions than any real affection. So what he's saying is we have this curiosity, and our curiosity is to kind of engage in things that are of consequence to us, irrelevant of what it is to anyone else. So I think in that case, the realm of ideas is that place where we exchange freely in terms of what those things are. And I just kind of enjoyed ruminating in the hopes that other people would join in, or they would join in or not. But the point is, Julie decided to join me, and now we kind of like do those things. So with that said, right, what I found is as time has gone on since we started this, there has been a kind of a pushback, or not necessarily to me specifically, but in terms of the idea of the fact that not everyone feels if the realm of ideas should be free or should exist. And that to me is troubling. Anyway, with that said, that's basically where we are. So the anniversary is actually Julie and my 31st anniversary.
Amazing.
Yes. Happy anniversary, loved one.
Happy anniversary, B.
Yeah. So it's not the anniversary of the program, because the program's kind of been off and on, different machinations, but it's basically used, and it was never intended to say, hey, how did the realm of ideas start and what has it become? But actually, as a result of looking, we realize it might be good to clarify that. So anyway, the most important part is what's new in Julie.
I'll get my drawing.
Okay, P.
You can introduce it.
I don't. Well, I mean,
No?
I'd love to introduce it. It's beautiful. It's like the last two drawings you've done have been so stunningly intense. It's kind of hard to imagine. I mean, it's like it at the same time that your drawings have been amazing. These two seem to have kind of advanced in leaps and bounds. Yeah. Anyway, so.
Yeah, you probably want dry hands.
Yes, definitely want dry hands, especially. 'Cause I mean, I always feel reluctant to even touch your pieces because I'm always afraid that I might ruin them.
No, I only trust you to touch
Mhm.
it. Nobody else.
Mhm.
So this is my drawing that, believe it or not, I started yesterday.
Amazing.
So this drawing did not. In fact, I can say exactly why, because the Japanese wing was not open
hmm
before then.
hmm
So I just started this. The Japanese wing reopened after being closed for almost 7 months, which was pretty unbelievably long amount of time, with a really stunning new show of ceramics and a lot of cuisine related. The woodblock prints are the famous Japanese restaurant series. There are lacquered makie, very lavish picnic sets. This piece is a sake bottle, a gourd shaped sake bottle with cherry blossoms, family crests on it. But what I have done actually is, there is a new research article in Science. It just came out a couple of weeks ago, called Sleeping or Sprouting. What I refer to is my favorite thing, plant science, which is that and mycology are my two favorite topics. And there's more going on in plant science than almost any other branch of the biological sciences, and it is also the least known and the least appreciated
Hmm.
by the populace. Even the very well educated are woefully unaware. And this is where some of the most amazing dialogues are, some of the most amazing reproductive strategies, structures, functions, and life cycles of plants and fungi are just amazing and really science fiction actual. So what you are seeing is here. I always do my own research, and I'm using this squash shaped lacquered sake bottle as the metaphor for actually the sleep wake cycle in plants. The article centered on a barley plant, but it does apply to all. It turns out that they have now tracked the entire metabolic sleep wake cycle, the circadian rhythms of plants, which remarkably mirror ours. In fact, plants can get tired, plants nap. If plants don't get enough rest, they don't function and they have an impaired memory, just like upside down jellyfish, of which there was another.
Hmm.
There was an article in this week's issue of Science.
Hmm.
So creatures and individuals, because that's what they are remarkably similar to humans in terms of their metabolism, their functions, even if they don't morphologically resemble us.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what I've done is, I had a hypothesis which I researched, that the squash bug, and this is a squash bug, this is a bug on the upper part that actually basically lives out its entire life cycle on squashes, on pumpkins, on gourds, which the sake bottle is styled after, on cucumbers. It, by laying its eggs and raising its young on the gourds, which it does, it severely disrupts the sleep wake cycle, the sprouting or sleeping. In fact, the very germination process is short circuited and then the plants die.
Hmm.
So in fact, that's what my drawing is about, is the effect of the apex predator on the squashes. And fascinatingly, when they lay their eggs, which are these beautiful glowing, they're about the size of a grain of rice, they are amber colored, they glow from deep within, on the veins of the squash leaves, they actually lay them in precise, perfect geometric patterns, which I have on my
Mm-hmm.
drawing here. That part I didn't quite get to, and I have two of them actually hatching
Mm.
into the larval state. And even the young on the larval state, when they hatch, they are poised in the same geometric patterns, nestled in almost in the Art Deco V's and W's that are part of the leaf structure and are intriguingly part of the vase.
Mm. Mm.
So that's what my drawing is about.
Mm.
What I plan to do, this is very interesting, is it will have a background. Your suggestion was an excellent one because nobody is a better critic of my work than Bruce.
Thank you, Pete.
Bruce is, and I will say this, I was not good at handling criticism when I met Bruce 31 years ago because what I received from other people was never really criticism.
Mm.
It was just, a lot of sour persimmons, a lot of jealousy, a lot of bitterness and resentment of my work. So it wasn't bona fide criticism, which is helpful and helps work grow and helps an artist to progress on their path. It's just meant, by people to make themselves feel better if they feel they don't measure up.
Mm-hmm.
And so your real criticism was instrumental.
Thank you, Pete.
Yeah.
Let me just kind of say briefly,
Okay.
I don't think it was really so much my criticism as maybe getting you to understand maybe some of my ideas regarding criticism. And I think, let me just kind of make a quick side note here. One of the things.
Mm-hmm.
Tea's tea.
It's our
Jasmine.
favorite, yeah. We also like mint, but almost
That's
no
in the
one
summer.
has it.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
I
hard
like
to
it.
get.
Yeah.
So anyway, the thing I think I made Julie understand is there's a difference between intent and information. And I feel as if that has always been, I mean, growing up in a very dysfunctional household, there was a tremendous amount of derision with very little in the way of actual information. So one of the kind of like unbreakable bonds I see is that criticism is the result of both observation and judgment. So what happens is intent, right, is irrelevant. So regardless of what the individual's intent was, if they wanted to hurt your feelings or they wanted to make you feel bad or they wanted to kind of like make you cry, it was irrelevant because what they were doing was using information in the intention of trying to be hurtful. The thing is, information is never hurtful, it's useful. So if someone says something like, stupid, like, well, you're just an idiot, this is just wasting your time. But if somebody, and I mean, what I found was that, through sports, one of the things that often happened was coaches were good at yelling at you about the things you weren't doing well enough. So a lot of times it's like, what are you, an idiot? Where did you learn to skate? In your backyard, in the sand? So you realize, like, you would kind of think like, oh, you know what? Is my skating not adequate? And then you'd look at it and you'd have to use your judgment to see if this information was relevant. So by separating the intent from the information, one can basically just focus on, is this valuable or is it not? And by developing your own sense of judgment, you can basically kind of separate and kind of dispense with the intent and just simply see if there's any information that's of value. In fact, one of the things used to frustrate, my enemies was the fact that they would kind of like think that they had kind of given me like a death blow. And then they realized like,
little did they know you were gleaning information.
Like, good point. Thank you. And they're like, that was supposed to hurt his feelings. Like, and they realize like, if someone tells you something that's of consequence and of value, that's the thing. The thing that happens is when you're too emotionally frail and you can only take compliments, that's the problem.
Well, yeah, it's very easy to say, oh, that's very nice, but that's meaningless.
It's meaningless.
I mean, because the person saying it has invested no time, no study, no actual depth of thought about you or your work or what they're saying. So even though that kind of pat on the back seems like a nice thing. It's
Worthless.
actually, yes, it's actually is that,
Even
but
dangerous because it
it
kind
is
of create
dangerous.
a false sense of
It lulls
security.
you into a
Yes.
false sense of
Uh,
security, but actually, it's the very seat of apathy,
hmm
meaning that
hmm
person doesn't care about you or your work. Because it's very easy to say, "Oh, that's
Yeah.
very nice."
Yeah, and
It
that'll kind of
doesn't.
like, like we tie this
Yeah,
into some of the
sure.
things we're talking
Yeah, then
about
we can go right
is
back
that
to our topic
one of the things
because we have
that
a lot to
happens,
say.
yeah, exactly, is that I believe that the greatest compliment,
Mm,
the greatest form of respect you can show to anyone is kind of keen observation of their work. So I
sure.
think that, like Julie said, anyone can say, "Oh, it's pretty." It takes no effort. It takes no insight. It
And
takes no
it's a blow
understanding.
off. I mean,
Exactly.
honestly,
And
it's
that's what people should be insulted by
yeah,
when somebody says,
that
"Oh, it
should
was beautiful." It's like, what?
what
Like,
is
that gives me no information. But on the other hand, if
mm,
someone basically gives you a kind of like thoughtful
really
understanding
specific. Yeah.
specific to the piece,
Yeah.
and kind of like, then you actually have been given quite a gift, because you can use that information hopefully to kind of generate a more consequential
Yeah.
thing. And in fact, even on the other extreme, having the best of intentions doesn't guarantee the criticism is going to be of consequence,
No, it
because
doesn't.
sometimes it can be a very poor observation.
Mhm.
So in that case, you have to be able to separate the two. So
Yes, let's get to our
pulling that
topic.
full circle, one
Yeah.
of the things I think happens is when the realm of ideas is not free to all or starts to become infringed upon. It becomes infringed upon because those people who are emotionally weak
Mhm.
start to kind of encroach and kind of like kind of like obstruct that operation of criticism. So, like I said, there's an unbreakable bond between observation and judgment, and that is a useful kind of that is a useful thing. Either your own judgments or someone else's,
Mhm.
either your own observations or someone else's observations, basically against the judgment to kind of be able to see those things of consequence. One of the things that started to really trouble me as a critic in architectural school when I was a professor was the fact that students were becoming too sensitive to uh, their ability to kind of assess and judge information. One of the things that's always funny is people
Mm.
look at architectural students and say, "Man, they really beat on you guys." They don't beat on us. Architectural school is a very rigorous, very kind of demanding
Right.
circumstance,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you're learning things because people take the time to take the effort to kind of tell you what they see. Now, in a world that basically kind of wants to just see sunshine and rainbows and
Mhm.
happy faces, and you know, we've gotten ourselves to the point where we've taken away one of our most important aspects, which is the ability to kind of self-reflect.
Tools, even.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly valuable tool. In fact,
Mhm.
the individual, when one is incapable of self-reflection, it's
Mm.
usually an indication that person is also allergic to accountability.
That's
So
funny.
anyway,
I
so
think we
so I
should get
think
to our topic
that's the
because we're
case, is that some
kind
of
of
the
running
things
out
that
of time.
start to encroach
Yeah.
on that is the fact that you will often be kind of chided, chastised,
Mhm.
sometimes even,
I'll put my drawing away.
ridiculed, or kind of in some cases, threatened,
Well, yes, as we both
by
admit.
being able to kind of do something that is absolutely necessary. But
Unbelievable, but
in
true.
terms of the concept of the anniversary,
Yep.
um, what is really getting into the heart of this is that, like, I enjoyed my own ruminations, in fact, because for me, speaking these things out often helps me clarify.
Mhm.
One of the things that was one of the great parts of COVID was Julie and I had the opportunity to take long walks and ruminate,
Yes, we did.
and we came up with tons and tons of things
Yes,
that
we
were
did.
of consequence to our work, which I kind of miss. I mean, so I'm next time there's a kind of like catastrophe, maybe the snowstorm will kind of like wash away the roads, and the sharks will eat the cars or whatever. Just so we'll see what happens. But um, the rumination itself is, for me, something of great consequence. So in order to kind of have that, I kind of felt to myself, I'm going to do it for me anyway. And if people want to kind of enjoy listening, or just kind of
I'll
like
get
if
my
they listen or
notes.
not, um, for me, all that really mattered was it helped me clarify my ideas, and that was the thing that I kind of feel has been so valuable. Um, so that's kind of continued. But one of the things that I think has happened is there's been this idea that things are not about the truth, that all things are about power, and there's no such thing as truth. And I kind of came up with something I wrote today, based on something, this it was, I often speak to people who, one of the things that's funny about Foucault fans is that Foucault fans don't understand philosophy because they don't read philosophy. They've usually only read Foucault. And that's a kind of a new thing because, my friends who kind of like were a few generations ago, who were kind of older than me, one of the things they all remember was the fact that in order to study philosophy, and I see this in people like Martha Nussbaum, you read everything that was ever written from the moment of like, the Ionians all the way up to and including like the third rate people who were kind of writing in history of science. But now basically people read what their professor wrote and they read whatever, they might kind of dabble in things like that. But the idea of the depth of knowledge, what Ortega would call, the general understanding, right, that comes from a kind of deep-seated understanding of the nature of the things that have been written, is completely lost. And I think this is like either an intentional attempt to kind of sabotage Western civilization, or it's just an example of supreme ignorance. I think it's the prior, because I don't think people are that stupid. But anyway, to get back to this, the thief thinks everyone steals. Power dynamics are only brought into play if one chooses to, and one exploits the tolerance of those who refrain, especially in social matters, as they prefer the consequence of adherence to mutual principles meant to socially liberate all and all express the emancipation of personal freedom to all in the greatest level. So, and this is something I think I've read to you before in terms of like what Ortega said in The Role to the Masses, is that, and also something similar to what Whitehead says in Venture's Ideas, is that persuasion, right, is more important than power. And as Ortega talked about in, The Revolt of the Masses, one never takes rule by using power. All you do is subjugate people. So power, in the sense that people like Foucault talk about, is basically the result of not being able to make arguments of consequence. Arguments of consequence are persuasive, and therefore will take an individual who realizes the mutual understanding is of greater benefit to society than it is to me just basically wanting to control and subjugate other individuals. Thinkers don't care about things like that. True thinkers don't care about things like that. I say mediocre thinkers try to do that because basically they kind of can't make a compelling argument and justification of what they want to make people believe. Anyway, so that said, moving on. So talk to me, P. Talk to me about your notes.
Well, one thing that is actually central in the core here to the realm of ideas, and it's a very mind-blowing notion, but there's been a lot of research in Japan and in Sweden about the loss of whole sets of human skills where handwriting has basically been vanquished and banished from people's lives. And we're not just talking, young grade school students or junior high students, but most adults don't handwrite anything at all. Even, are you missing something?
Nope.
Okay. They do not write anything by hand. They also don't read actual words on paper. Having a virtual life is having no life at all. That's a quote from me. Because when things cannot be seen, cannot be touched, when you cannot smell or hear or sense anything, When objects and entities have no weight, they cease to have a significance. There is not a lot of meaning when something exists in the ether. I mean, when something is simply online in most people's mind, not just in their conscious mind, in their unconscious mind, this is not an entity on equal footing with their waking lives. So right off the bat, everything else has now taken a position under them, whether or not it really is. And in fact, many of these things are above them. In fact, they're so far above them, they are in the realm of ideas. And I will get right to my main point, which is that what happens when you have enormous groups of people, huge sections of our modern society who cannot access the realm of ideas due to their own insufficiencies. And these insufficiencies are marked and they're vast. These insufficiencies are ideological, they're processing insufficiencies, they're cognitive insufficiencies. People lack the ability to visualize anything. They cannot arrange information. They cannot craft a hierarchy of information, which is incredibly important. When things are all pushed down into the fen, and the fen is one of my favorite words, it is an archaic word meaning marsh or boggy swamp. I'll say that because it's not a word. One of my favorite symphonies of Ralph Vaughan Williams. Yep. One of my absolute favorite composers ever, vastly underplayed now, is in the fen country. So in the boglands, in the marshy swamps, but that is where life percolates. That is where vast ideas are formed and go through an entire life cycle. So I'm going to get right to it. Handwriting. It sounds like a trivial loss. It is not trivial at all. The lack of people's ability, the failings of vast sectors of the population to write anything down with a pen or pencil on paper, the act of crafting letter forms is vastly more than that. So I've read several research articles, and there was an incredibly good science show on NHK World. A big shout out to my favorite channel. If anyone is not watching the Japanese International Channel, you don't have to speak Japanese. I speak Japanese food, but not a word of the language. I speak also Japanese art in a fluent way, but I can't speak a word of the language. Everything is broadcast in English with someone who's bilingual, or there's a translator or subtitles. Anyway, here is what has been lost. There are generations of not just students, young adults, older adults, who, even if they choose to, have lost the ability of handwriting. Here's why that's important. In the realm of ideas, you need motor skills. In the realm of ideas, you have to understand the sensory input of touch. Without handwriting, you lose finger and hand coordination. How the brain, and this goes right to neuroscience, this is a neurobiological crisis of epic proportions, and I am not overstating this. This is a very underappreciated topic, and I hope this show is picked up and people see how vitally important. Without the brain getting involved in motor skills that are inherent in handwriting, you are translating your thoughts to your hand. You aren't writing like some automaton. You are not a player piano. You are transcribing and translating what's in your mind onto a piece of paper. Therefore, you have to have a coordination of all of your ligaments and tendons and nerves in your hand. You have to translate your thoughts into words, into phrases, into paragraphs. And here's key: you have to organize information via motor skills. The sense of touch, not just the feel of the paper and the pressure of the pen, which they talked about in the show. That is a still from the science show. I will take it much, much further. It is the touch of your own clothing as it moves against your own skin. It creates a rhythm. It creates an etude. So your clothing on your skin is creating an etude, which is a way to learn and practice. Bruce, would you like to weigh in? Or should I continue?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting is you kind of remember we talked a long time ago between us about the idea of the kind of loss of certain abilities with women who were overly plastic surgeried.
Yes.
And it reminded me of a book.
Talking about that at supper.
Right. It reminded me of a book by Darwin, where Darwin talked about animal communication and expression.
Mm-hmm.
And what I kind of took away from that book was the fact that we employ our senses as if we were employing kind of certain mechanical operations. And rather than the expressions be intended to say, I'm sad, I'm happy, it was the fact that usually there was an adjustment of the structures, the mechanisms, in order to get information. Now, if a woman basically whose face has been Botox to the point where this is it,
right,
she can't
no mirroring.
Right, there's no mirroring, and there's also no adjustment of the apertures and the apparatuses to look deeper, to look shallower, to kind of change the focus. So what was interesting was the fact that you lose the ability to assess emotional detail by not being able to adjust your gaze, not being able to adjust your range. So what happens is, that was one of the things I felt was brilliant about Darwin's book, but also really amazing in the fact that, like, usually women who are that vain and have that many plastic surgeries weren't usually the brightest people. But now on top of that, they've kind of hindered themselves even more by taking away their ability to kind of sense and be instinctive.
True.
One of the things that certain people do is use that instinctive capacity in the absence of intelligence.
Yeah.
And so when a person who basically has relied on that now has kind of siphoned that away, it kind of just creates a kind of bigger issue. But the point is, that was these people are not thinking about these things in a full psychological range. But in that case, I think this is kind of similar to what we're having, is that it's similar to what we talked about, the death of 2D design.
Yeah.
Is that once you take away fundamental exercises, you lose fundamental principles.
Yeah.
And the ability to kind of like seek out detail in a fine level, is a really important thing to have. And if you lose it, that's very, very much of a problem.
True. Yeah, I'm gonna.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
The other thing is, just as many men are getting plastic surgery now as women. And most people do not know that. They would see it as just a female thing. As many male actors get plastic surgery as women.
That's true. That makes sense.
Right. And here's what is lost: empathy. Can I have some tea?
Yeah, because you kind of like, you can't look for it because you don't have the ability to focus the mechanisms. Right. You only have that one face.
And yes, and also a lot of empathy, that's funny, is actually activated by the mirroring process. That's funny, P.
Okay.
Anyway, I just want to get to these other three because it's really, really important. So this is also from
actually,
from the
oops.
show. Oops. Oh, yeah, I didn't want to do that. Yeah, just a sec. No,
I
that's
got
not.
it.
I get it. Oh,
It's
okay.
gone.
Okay, here, I'll just hold it.
All right, I'm trying to get it so that you can actually see it because of glare.
Sure. Okay,
Okay.
thanks. Okay, so let me elaborate on
It's
these,
hard to see.
if I may.
Okay.
Okay, I will just wait. I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
a grip on this. Okay, so here are some of the other things that are being. Oh, thanks, Pete. That are being lost with and I mean, there are students in Japan. Oh, thanks, P. He's so nice. Who don't interact with their teachers at all. In fact, not just in Japan. Every student has a computer, has a tablet, and the questions are funneled through a tablet. They answer on the tablet. They don't write anything. They aren't speaking. Here's what else is lost: the perception of time. Now, a circadian clock is vital to how we eat and we reproduce and we sleep and we wake and we function. But understanding your temporal reality is vital to a sense of self. So the pauses and the rhythms, and I will expound on that, to the melodies, like I said, the etudes, the sonatas, and the nocturnes, because nothing talks about time better than classical music terminology. So you have a movement, you have a long amount of time, you have a short, and sight. So the arrangements, the shapes of the letters, this is all done through a coordination of neuronal processing. Would you like to say?
No, go ahead.
Oh,
Continue.
sure. And hearing. This is not, a silent exchange in virtual time, which is not real time. The actual sounds of the words, as people write with real pens on real paper, their brain hears the words. They hear the words. These are spoken words. In fact, they are not reading the words either. They are not comprehending the ideas. In fact, as we've mentioned on our previous shows, comprehension of ideas, the very formation, the very generation of ideas is so severely short circuited and compromised when people are not corralling and organizing their thoughts, because using a computer all the time is not self-organization. It organizes your thoughts for you, and not very effectively. Would you like to weigh in on that?
All right. So I think I see what you're saying, and I think that it's interesting because um, the main problem here is being serviceable within the realm of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But if one is incapable of kind of understanding the ability to formulate and manufacture and kind of construct a proposal or an argument or a discussion, I don't know what what the substitute is. It's kind of similar to before we were talking about truth, and I remember this person who, like, this, I can't remember her name, but she said truth is a distraction. And I said, like, well, I mean, if we're going to substitute for truth, I need to know what it is, and this is always the piece that seems a little bit nefarious. I think I mentioned it the other day, is like, what's the alternative? And you never really get a clear answer. But, between, if we're going to be in a post-truth society, I wonder what the benefit is. Like I said, the universe appears to be, for the best of my understanding, knowable. So if that sense of knowing exists and a sense of truth exists, to me, that sense of truth is how one explains our understanding of that which we know. So truth is a kind of like apparatus that allows us to correlate between what we have observed and what we've been able to discern and possibly be able to use to understand that which is understandable. I don't really know of a better process. And I don't really know if I'm at the point where I can kind of have good reason to abandon this process.
Mhm.
So, I mean, the idea of persuasion, which has allowed people to kind of substitute persuasion over power, that allows us to kind of live in advanced societies. There isn't another way in which I can see us having gotten here.
Mm.
So I'm not really sure what the alternative is.
Mm.
So
Hmm.
that said,
Well said, Puddle.
thanks.
Mm.
Hmm.
Okay, I'd like to add something.
Sure.
Oh, do you have some more points?
No.
Okay. What is key in the realm of ideas, as Bruce has very eloquently described it,
Mhm.
are those things that are encapsulated in the process of handwriting and all of the brain functions that are part and parcel to handwriting and actually reading and processing information by yourself using your own mind. So, what runs counter to the originality of beautiful ideas and the dialogues that would go on in the realm of ideas is digital input.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah, let
So,
me just say something
oh,
quickly.
sure.
One of the
Yeah.
things that was interesting when I read the piece before, that short, like 3 or 4 pages at the end of the Passions by Hume, one of the things that kind of overwhelmingly present in the words is the sense of affection, the sense of love, the sense of adventure, the sense of curiosity, this kind of childlike innocence by which we kind of pursue truth. And I think that one of the things that I think we talked about this on a separate term is that when we engage in certain things, we feel as if there's a certain demeanor that's necessary. And it's so beautiful to listen to someone, like Hume, who is like probably the height of the explanation, the description of what I would call the public intellectual
Mhm.
of all time. And as a result, you see the fact that this person was very much speaking about things in the deepest sense, but speaking about them in a way that was kind of like very, very overly, not sentimental, but I'd say deeply romantic. And to kind of understand that, and kind of the way in which language can be depicted, I only kind of think that you can come to that by having read the passions and understood the passions of other individuals. So for me, the fact that this is kind of like being weeded out and like we're kind of getting a kind of correctness that's kind of like replacing the absolute authenticity of individuals is to me terrifying. It's almost as if we're kind of giving away that which keeps us separate from the machine. The machine can do all the things that we can do in that kind of mechanistic way. But I've never met you know I've never understood the passions within the nature of machines.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I'm going to give two really disturbing examples right after I describe this. I want to make sure you have time at the end.
Mhm.
So, what is antithetical to the birthing of original ideas, the creation of great works of art, great works of music, great ideas in science and mathematics is digital input. And that is precisely what has superseded human handwriting. And it is not a substitute for the handwritten word for these reasons. Is in terms of memory scaffolding, which is what I call it, with digital input, it's hard to retain anything. They've shown over and over again that people who simply input everything on a computer retain almost nothing. at least 60 to 70% of what they are ostensibly, typing in or clicking on, this is not learned. This is not committed to their memory. This information is as fleeting as the weather in Montana. It is not indelible. It has made no psychological or emotional mark. In terms of time, the temporal gravity of digital input is very, very fast. And that's why people love it. It is immediate. It's gratifying, but it's gratifying in the way that junk food is gratifying. It has no nutritive, input. It doesn't build a system. It doesn't make a healthy body. It's just fast. Handwriting, in terms of memory, it's easy to retain information when you are handwriting it. Time, it slows down. And the idea of just fast input, it takes time, it bends it, it warps it, and it basically kills time to the point where time and the sorting of time, the divisions of time, and all of the beautiful intricacies of time are gone. With true handwriting, it's slow, it's considered, it's detailed, it's deliberate. And the third and final thing is correcting, which most people don't even think of. It's easy, but what are you really correcting? They actually asked a bunch of very well-educated adults in Tokyo. I mean, very urban population. They had characters written, the producers of this science show, to read a couple of words in kanji and then to write those words. I mean, these were simple words like open window, or dusty floor, or fast car. Nobody could do it. They could not recognize the kanji symbols. They could not write the kanji symbols. They would start on one stroke and they'd say, "Oh my God, I forgot." And they'd start to laugh, or they'd hang their head, or they say, "Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed." That's frightening.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right.
Yeah.
This is interesting because I was reading about this today, but this kind of strikes to
Sure.
this. So this is also from the piece that I read for, but it's further on. Mm-hmm. It has been proven at large that the influence of belief is at once to enliven and fix an idea in the imagination and prevent all kinds of hesitation and uncertainty about it. Both these circumstances are advantageous. By the vivacity of the idea, we interest the fancy and produce, though in a lesser degree, the same pleasure, which arises from a moderate passion. As the vivacity of the idea gives pleasure, so it certainly prevents uneasiness. By fixing one particular idea in the mind and keeping it from wavering in the choice of its objects. So in this case, right, mm-hmm. by having that affection, you place ideas in certain places to have a kind of consequence. So there's a kind of like active kind of polishing or kind of like monitoring of ideas, in the fact that you use one to fix it in your brain. And in fact, he's kind of saying this almost in a kind of neurological kind of reality, in the fact that by exercising, by exercise, and this is written in like 29, 30, something like that. But like, this is the idea, one fixes by fixing, by having these things, by working through these things, kind of like these ruminations, we fix certain ideas in the brain. Without the ability to do that, not only do you not have that kind of like network of consequential pieces, I don't know what you have if you have anything at all. So, that to me is deeply troubling. So, and I think it undermines this premise.
It does.
For me, truth is that which reveals understanding of that which is knowable. And I kind of think that there isn't a way to kind of do that unless this kind of scaffolding and this kind of networking within the concept of your own, like we talked about it before, your own lexicon, happens. I don't know the way in which it could. So maybe, truth is being undermined in certain ways by a kind of subversive kind of attempt to kind of undermine, the consequence of genius. But I think at other times, it's just kind of like the technology is not aware of the fact that it kind of is woefully inadequate and deficient and is eroding certain kind of concepts that
without people
without
really
really
even
understanding
knowing.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, and we go back to that piece by Borges, where it's like what leaves this earth with any one individual. And in this case, I read something the other day that the last prisoner, I believe, of Auschwitz, the last person who ever was a prisoner of Auschwitz has passed away, which means that we no longer have any live reference of a prisoner from that consequence. Now, that to me is that there are certainly things when this woman passed away, I think at 103 years old, or something like that, that we certainly would have had necessity for. So in this case, we let these things slip through our fingers, right? And sometimes don't even know what they were. This was just a tiny blurb, but at the certain sense, there will no longer be any survivors of the camps. Just the same way that with the end of anything, before we actually completely absorb all the necessary information, those which would have basically given us firsthand accounts are gone. So in this case, that's kind of one of these things where I think I've heard many people say, oh, the inability to do cursive or the inability to write, or like, it's like, I'm like, yeah. But I mean, I always thought that was just kind of like a little bit of paranoia. But now listening to this, as much as this kind of wasn't exactly about the change in the realm of ideas is free from all, from what it was to what it became, it was an important topic or an interesting topic.
Sorry, I thought it like LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah. When history cannot even be read and cannot even be understood, even by those who want to understand it, like a 9th grade girl in America on the same show could not read cursive script, could not read her grandmother's recipe card, which was written in beautiful script, and did not know what the word bake meant, meaning there was no comprehension of what was there. So her brain couldn't even process that or any of the ideas that went along with that.
Interesting. So, I mean, I kind of think that we talked about this a long time ago about the fact that the metaphor was not actually kind of like a situation of kind of like connecting letters to make words. And, it really is about concepts. And I think if you don't understand concepts, you can't operate. You can't operate the metaphor. And therefore you kind of like are losing probably the most speculative capacity that you have.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've kind of reached the end here, and I think this was important. So that's the anniversary. The Realm of Ideas is Free to All has moved from where it was to where it is, and it'll continue to move on, not only in terms of its intention, but in terms of what the context will basically impose on it. So next week, we're actually going to be talking about something that's very, very important, which is the nature of the adventurous mind. And I've kind of looked forward to that. So,
me too.
All right. The Realm of Ideas is free to all. And remember that. The Realm of Ideas is free to all. And it's to the benefit of all for us to keep it that way, even if we have to fight for it.
Precisely.